She was 6 years old, no shoes, no coat, curled up beside a lamppost like the world had forgotten she existed. Everyone walked past her, except one man. What happened next turned pain into purpose. And 10 years later, she stepped onto a stage that would change everything. The morning rain had finally stopped, but the air still carried the damp scent of wet pavement and earth. The city stirred awake under a blanket of grey clouds, their edges thinning as the sun strained to peek through. Shimmering puddles dotted the sidewalks, mirroring the glint of passing cars and flickers of early light. People hustled by, wrapped in coats and concerns, their faces buried in phones or lost in thought. But one man noticed. Mr. Jonathan Miles adjusted the brown paper bag under his arm as he turned the corner of Maple and 6th. His steps slowed when he saw her, small, still, and silent. A little girl, no more than 6, sat curled up beside a leaning lamppost. Her pale yellow dress, soaked through, clung to her thin frame like tissue to skin. Her bare feet were tucked beneath her, and her arms were wrapped around her knees. Her short, tightly coiled hair stuck to her forehead, dripping. Her face, delicate, beautiful, and heartbreakingly blank, rested against the concrete like it was the only safe place she had left in the world. Jonathan stopped walking. The world kept moving around them. People stepped aside or looked away, and in that moment he felt something rise inside him. An ache, a recognition, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He bent down carefully and spoke with a quiet, kind voice. "Sweetheart, can you hear me?" Her eyes opened just a little, large, deep brown eyes that looked like they held oceans, hollow, exhausted. "You okay?" She blinked slowly. Cold. That one word broke something open in Jonathan's chest. He set his bag down, peeled off his tan jacket, and wrapped it gently around her trembling body. She didn't resist. When he scooped her up into his arms, her tiny fingers clung to his shirt. She tucked her head into the crook of his neck as if she had always known him. He walked straight home. Jonathan's apartment was small, cozy, and full of memories. Pictures of his late wife, Camille, and their daughter, Maya, lined the walls and shelves. Maya had passed in her teens, an accident that shattered the family. Camille died just 2 years later, her heart giving out as if it could no longer beat through grief. Since then, Jonathan had lived in quiet rhythm, morning walks, crossword puzzles, and warm cups of tea. But the moment the little girl curled up on his old plaid couch and fell asleep without a word, something inside him reawakened. After making her some warm soup and helping her dry off, he sat across from her. "What's your name?" he asked gently. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Imani." "Do you know where your parents are?" She shook her head, eyes dropping. "Did someone hurt you?" A pause. No answer. That night, Imani slept wrapped in blankets on the couch, Jonathan's, jacket still snug around her shoulders. He sat in the nearby armchair, watching over her like a guardian from another life. The storm outside had passed, but he knew a different storm had just begun. The next morning, Jonathan called social services. A caseworker named Marisol arrived within the hour, her eyes warm but cautious. She asked questions, took notes, and gently spoke to Imani. Her answers were brief and uncertain. No last name, no address, no identification. "We've already run her photo through the national database," Marisol said. "No matches, no reports. It's possible she was never registered or abandoned quietly." Jonathan frowned. "What happens to her now?" Marisol hesitated. "Foster care is overwhelmed, but if you're open to it, we can initiate temporary guardianship. It's a fast-tracked option, if you're willing." He didn't need to think. "I'll take care of her, for as long as she needs." Days became weeks. Imani didn't speak much, but she followed Jonathan everywhere. She sat at the table while he made breakfast, waited by the door when he took out the trash, sat beside him in silence during old black and white movies. Her silence wasn't empty. It was alert, like a child trying to relearn what safety felt like. One afternoon, Jonathan found her standing beside the upright piano that had gathered dust in the corner of the living room. It had belonged to Camille. No one had touched it in years. Imani's small fingers hovered above the keys, tracing them softly. "You like the piano?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Go ahead." She hesitated, then tapped a single key, then another. A few uneven notes rang out, raw, out of tune, unsure. But her posture was so deliberate, her touch so careful, that it stopped Jonathan in his tracks. That night she tried again, a broken scale. 3 notes forward, 2 notes back, offbeat, but constant. Jonathan didn't say anything. He just let her keep going. One Sunday morning, while Jonathan cooked scrambled eggs in the kitchen, something strange floated through the air. A melody, faint but full, real. He dropped the spatula and ran into the living room. Imani was seated. At the piano, her eyes closed, her fingers dancing lightly across the keys. She was playing Amazing Grace. It wasn't perfect, but it was beautiful, aching, soulful, filled with something ancient and aching. Jonathan stood frozen, tears misting his eyes. "I heard it in church once," Imani said when she noticed him. "I wanted to try." He knelt beside her and whispered, "You didn't just try, baby. You made something beautiful." She smiled, just a little. It was her first. Jonathan officially became her foster parent 2 months later. Imani began to blossom, slowly, carefully. She started humming to herself around the house. She painted with watercolors in the afternoons. She read books curled up under blankets, but nothing brought her more joy than the piano. Every late afternoon, when golden sunlight filtered through the blinds and bathed the keys in warmth, she'd sit and play simple hymns, playful tunes, anything she could remember. One morning, their church pastor visited. "I heard about Imani's playing," he said. "Would she like to perform during the Sunday service?" Imani looked unsure. "You don't have to," Jonathan said, "but if you want to, we'd love to hear you." The next Sunday, she stood beside the piano in her best dress, navy blue with small silver stars. The church was quiet, people waiting curiously. Imani sat, took a deep breath and played. The room was silent. Her hands moved with tenderness and courage. She played His Eye is on the Sparrow, and by the time she finished, there were tears. On more than one face. "She plays like someone who remembers things too deep for words," the pastor whispered to Jonathan. She didn't respond to the praise. She just smiled softly, as if the music had said everything she needed. One evening, Jonathan came home with a flyer in his hand. "There's a youth music showcase downtown next month," he said. "Piano division. No fee to enter. Just a performance. You can share your gift." Imani looked at him. "I'm not ready." "You don't have to be perfect," he replied. "You just have to be real, and you already are." She thought about it for a long time, then nodded. The auditorium was much larger than Imani imagined. The ceilings arched like the spine of a cathedral, and the seats stretched into darkness beyond the lights of the stage. Backstage, voices murmured. Piano cases opened. Fingers flexed. Children practiced warm-ups, some tapping nervous rhythms on their thighs, others humming like bees trapped in jars. Imani stood beside Jonathan, dressed in a soft sky-blue dress and the same white shoes he had. Polished 3 times that week. Her hands were steady, but her heart wasn't. She peeked around the curtain, watching another contestant finish. A boy in a velvet jacket, tall and elegant, his fingers flying across the keys like sparrows. The applause was thunderous. Imani stepped. "Back! I don't belong here," she whispered. Jonathan knelt in front of her, his graying beard brushing the edge of her dress. "You belong wherever your heart takes you, and if that place has a piano, then that's where you're meant to be." "But what if they laugh?" They won't. And if they don't clap, Jonathan smiled gently, then they're the ones. Who didn't hear what I hear? A voice called over the intercom. Contestant number 11, Imani Carter, please make your way to the stage. She closed her eyes, breathed, then walked. When she sat at the piano, the crowd hushed. The judges looked up. One scribbled something, another simply watched, pen still in hand. Imani didn't notice. She touched the keys like they were old friends. Her fingers found the opening notes, soft, slow, like the beginning of a question. The melody she played was her own, unnamed, unfinished, but fully felt. It wasn't flawless. One note wavered. A chord trembled. But it was true. The room sat in reverent silence as the last note hung in the air like the echo of something sacred. And then, applause. Gentle at first, then louder. A standing ovation. Some audience members had tears in their eyes. Backstage, Jonathan wrapped her in a hug that nearly lifted her off the ground. You were perfect, he whispered. No, Imani said, burying her face into his coat. I was me. After the competition, everything began to change. A woman with sharp glasses and a lanyard approached them. Her voice was warm but practiced, the kind used by people who talk to prodigies for a living. Mr. Carter, she asked. My name is Melody Sinclair. I work with the American Foundation for Young Musicians. We scout rare talent, children with exceptional musical intuition. Jonathan's brow raised. She's not just gifted, Melody continued. She's exceptional. We'd like to offer her a scholarship, full tuition to our academy, private instructors, mentorships, national exposure. Imani stared at her shoes. Jonathan stared at the woman. You're serious? Completely. She's 1 in 10 million. Jonathan looked down at Imani. It's up to you, sweetheart. She glanced between them. Only if I can still play at church. Melody smiled. Of course. The weeks that followed became a blur of lessons, interviews, and attention Imani had never known. She wasn't comfortable with cameras. But music, that was her language. She spent hours each day at the piano. Her fingers no longer searched. They knew. She learned to compose, to blend scales with stories, to put into sound what her mouth had no words for. Her instructors, seasoned and skeptical at first, began to call her the whisper composer. She doesn't just play, one teacher said. She listens to what the silence is asking. Her church performances grew too. She played every other Sunday, never flashy, always full. Her small frame and quiet presence drew more people than any sermon. One video, an iPhone clip from a churchgoer, went viral. The piano girl who slept on the sidewalk. It reached millions. Letters poured in. Some were from musicians, some from homeless shelters, others from little girls who said, "You made me feel like I'm not invisible." Jonathan shielded her from the noise. No managers, no deals, no TV. Appearances unless she asked. This is your gift, he told her, not theirs. Don't let them steal the joy from it. But the past has a way of tapping on the shoulder, even when the music is loud. It happened after her recital at the City Hall, an elegant evening, chandeliers glittering like starlight. Imani, now 11, had played a new composition titled Lifted, Leaves. It was about things we lose and how they find their way back. When she walked outside into the parking lot with Jonathan, something in the air shifted. A man stood under a tree across the street. Thin, nervous, watching. He didn't clap, didn't speak, didn't move. Imani froze. Her breathing changed. Her body stiffened. Jonathan noticed immediately. You know him. Imani's voice was barely audible. I think I used to. The man turned and walked away, and just like that, the music in her seemed to go quiet. That night, she didn't play. She sat on the piano bench, staring at the keys as if they no longer made sense. Jonathan sat beside her. What if my past finds me? She asked. He didn't speak right away. Then he placed his hand on hers. Then we face it together. That's what family does. The next few weeks were quiet. Imani still went to lessons, still performed at church, but something had shifted. Her melodies became darker, slower. One day, after a lesson, her teacher pulled Jonathan aside. "She's not losing skill," she said. "She's changing, processing something. Let her." Jonathan nodded. He understood. Healing isn't a staircase. It's a maze. Then, on a breezy October afternoon, a knock came at the door. Jonathan opened it to find a woman in her early 40s, wearing a deep maroon coat and holding a trembling envelope. "Mr. Carter," she asked. "My name is Dr. Renee Lewis. I think I know Imani." Jonathan froze. She opened the envelope and handed him a photo. It was old and worn, but unmistakable. A little girl in a pale yellow dress, smiling beside a young woman. "Same eyes, same curls. She's my niece," Renee said. "She vanished 10 years ago. My brother took her and disappeared." Jonathan's voice cracked. "Your brother abandoned her?" Renee nodded, eyes glistening. "He was arrested last month, false IDs. He confessed, said he left her somewhere because she wouldn't stop crying." A silence dropped like a curtain. Just then, Imani appeared in the hallway. Her eyes met Renee's. Renee's voice trembled. "Do you remember me?" Imani stared. A pause. Then, "You were in a photo, on a wall. I remember." DNA confirmed it. Renee wasn't just family. She was Imani's last living link. Her mother had passed away a year after Imani vanished. No one knew where the child had gone. Renee had searched, filed reports, begged police. But the trail had vanished with her brother. Now, here she was. "I'm not here to take her away," she told Jonathan. "You raised her, you saved her, but if she's willing, I'd love to be part of her future." Jonathan turned to Imani. "It's your choice." Imani looked at Renee, then back at him. "You can come to my next concert," she said. "Let's start there." Her next performance was held in a grand music hall. She wore grey slacks and a pearl-white blouse, her hair braided down the middle. She didn't play someone else's song. She played her own. It was called Echoes from the Sidewalk. It began with 3 quiet notes. Then, slowly, the melody rose, layered, complicated, mournful, and majestic. It told a story of rain, rescue, piano keys, and family not born, but chosen. The hall was silent when she finished. Then applause and tears. Backstage, Renee hugged her. "Your mother would be so proud." Imani nodded. "I hope she hears me." Snow fell in gentle spirals outside the frosted windows of Carnegie Hall. The night was silent, except for the low murmur of an eager audience gathering inside. Critics, composers, dignitaries, dreamers, all waiting for the one girl who defied expectation, logic, and fate. Imani Carter was about to make her debut. At just 13 years old, she had become a name in circles that rarely welcomed anyone without pedigree. But Imani had something rarer than legacy. She had truth. The kind of unfiltered expression that turned keys into poetry and silence into thunder. Backstage, Imani sat alone in a quiet dressing room. She wore a black satin dress and a locket given to her by Jonathan. Inside was a folded note that read, "Wherever the music takes you, I'm already there." She looked into the mirror, her reflection older than the years she'd lived. A knock interrupted her thoughts. It was Renee. 10 minutes, she said softly. "You ready, baby?" Imani nodded. "I'm ready to begin." The concert wasn't just a performance, it was a story. Imani walked onto the stage under a single spotlight. No orchestra, no elaborate introduction, just her and the grand piano, polished until it shimmered like still water. She bowed. Then silence. Then music. She opened with Winter's Heart, a piece she had composed during the quiet, uncertain Weeks after finding Renee, it started sparse, notes like snowflakes falling slowly one by one, then a tremble, then warmth, as if the melody remembered spring. It was mesmerizing. The audience leaned in, breathless. For the next hour, Imani played a sequence of original compositions, each a chapter of her life. Concrete Cradle, about her days on the sidewalk. Jasper's Waltz, in honor of the stray cat that once kept her company. Jonathan's Hands, a piece that grew stronger with every note, like the arms of the man who lifted her into safety. Every key she pressed seemed to carry emotion carved from time itself. Some audience members wept openly, even the critics forgot their pens, and then came the final piece, Homeward. It began with just 3 notes, familiar, steady, innocent. As the melody bloomed, Imani closed her eyes and let her fingers become storytellers. The composition was both a lullaby and a battle cry, a tribute to lost mothers, to second chances, to chosen families and untold miracles. When the last chord echoed through the hall, no one moved. Then, slowly, the crowd rose, one by one, like a wave lifting to meet the shore, a standing ovation. Imani stood, bowed once, and walked off stage into Jonathan's waiting arms. That night, a New York Times headline read, "From Sidewalk to Symphony, a star is born." But Imani didn't feel like a star. She felt like a messenger. The next morning, she sat on the fire escape of Jonathan's modest apartment. The city buzzed below, but she was still with the music. Renee joined her, holding 2 mugs of cocoa. "You changed them last night," Renee said. "You made people feel again." Imani looked down at her hands. "Is that enough? Just making them feel?" Renee smiled. "That's how healing begins. Not with answers, but with emotion." A pause. "Would you ever consider doing more?" Renee asked. "Like starting something bigger? Something that lasts?" Imani blinked. "Like what?" Renee handed her a folder. Inside was a proposal. Project Symphony, a music mentorship program for homeless youth. Imani read silently. It was simple. A non-profit. A network of piano teachers. Donated instruments. City partnerships. Scholarships. A chance for children like her, lost, silent, unseen, to find expression. "Can I run it?" Imani asked, her voice firm. Renee nodded. "We'll help. But yes, it'll be yours." Imani looked up at the winter sky, already imagining the music that would rise from the cracks in the pavement. The first Project Symphony class launched 3 months later. 10 kids. 10 broken stories, 10 unopened gifts. They met in a donated room above a church. There were second-hand pianos, cracked stools, and walls covered in sheet music scribbled by hand. Imani, still only 13, taught the first class herself. She didn't lecture. She listened. "Play how you feel," she told them, "even if it sounds wrong." One boy, Matteo, played just 2 notes, over and over again. He was 7. Couldn't read, couldn't spell, but those 2 notes made him smile. "That's music," Imani said. "That's a start." A girl named Zoe came next. Her fingers danced like she was fighting off ghosts. Imani sat beside her and whispered, "Let the ghosts speak, but don't let them win." Within a year, Project Symphony had 40 students and a waiting list of 300. But Imani wasn't after numbers. She was after freedom. She traveled from city to city, speaking in schools, shelters, and churches, not as a prodigy, not as a sensation, but as a survivor. "My story isn't about music," she often said. "It's about being seen. Music was just the first way I let the world see me." Then came the letter. It arrived on a Tuesday, thick envelope, gold seal, addressed in delicate calligraphy. It was from the Royal Conservatory of London. They were offering her a full scholarship, prestige, travel, history, the opportunity of a lifetime. Imani placed the letter on the piano and stared at it for days. She wanted to go, but she was torn. Jonathan, ever the anchor, saw the struggle. "You're allowed to grow," he told her. "Even vines need new walls to climb. But what if I lose everything I built here? You won't. We'll keep it going. You go chase your next movement." And so, at 15, Imani flew to London. The conservatory was a different world, formal, rigorous, technical. She studied under masters, learned theory in 5 languages, and practiced until her fingers blistered. But something stayed constant: her voice. Even among centuries of tradition, Imani kept writing music that spoke of shadows and light, silence and survival. Her classmates were stunned by her originality. Her professors praised her soul. During her final recital at the conservatory, she played a new piece called The Unheard. It was composed for every child who had ever been passed by. When she finished, no one applauded right away. They just sat, transfixed, broken open. Then came the thunder. On the flight back to the US, she looked out the window as clouds drifted. Beneath her, she wasn't a girl from the sidewalk anymore. She was a bridge, a conductor between pain and hope, past and future, silence and song. Back in New York, Project Symphony had expanded to 6 cities. Matteo had learned 5 full songs. Zoe had composed her first original piece. Jonathan now taught twice a week. Renee helped run operations. And Imani, she returned to lead a masterclass. The kids screamed when she walked in, but she just smiled and said, "Show me what you know." That night they held a small concert. No microphones, no curtains, just hearts wide open. One boy, no older than 9, played a song called "I Slept in a Car Once." Another girl performed "My Mom is a Poem." Imani sat in the back, tears streaming down her face. "This," she whispered to herself, "is the real symphony." It was a crisp autumn evening in Brooklyn, the kind of night when the wind carries music from open windows and the city smells like cinnamon, concrete, and the past. Imani Carter was 17. She stood in front of the mirror, her reflection now full of quiet power. Her features were sharper, but her eyes held the same warmth, the same fire that had carried her from a sidewalk to stages across continents. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration. The mayor was awarding her with the Spirit of the City, honor, a rare civic commendation, recognizing individuals whose stories had transformed not just lives, but legacies. Project Symphony had now touched over 10,000 children in 6 states, and its model was being studied by universities and non-profits alike. But Imani felt unsettled. Something heavy lingered in her chest, like a whisper she couldn't catch. Hours later, as she stood on the grand stage in City Hall, the audience rose to applaud. Cameras flashed. The speech was perfect, heartfelt, measured, inspirational. "I'm not here tonight because I was rescued," Imani said. "I'm here because someone noticed me, and then believed I was worth keeping." The crowd cheered, but Jonathan, seated in the front row, noticed something no one else did. Imani's eyes weren't scanning the room. They were searching it, and afterward she was gone. Jonathan paced the quiet sidewalk outside City Hall. The sky had turned from pink to purple, and still no sign of Imani. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Renee arrived, breathless. "She didn't text you?" Jonathan asked. "No. She left right after the speech," Renee replied. "Security said she slipped out the back entrance alone." They waited and waited. 2 hours passed, then 4. They called everyone they could think of, Imani's friends, mentors, board members, even the conservatory in London. Nothing. By midnight, Jonathan filed a missing person report. "She's almost an adult," the officer said. "Maybe she just needed space." "She never disappears," Jonathan said, "not without telling someone." 3 days passed. The city buzzed with rumors. News outlets spun theories. Commentators debated whether she had run away, had a breakdown, or was overwhelmed by fame. But Jonathan knew better. She was reaching back into something. Then came the letter. No stamp, no return address. Just a plain white envelope slipped under the Project Symphony office door. Jonathan opened it with trembling hands. It wasn't signed, just a handwritten note. Don't worry about me. I needed to find where it began. I needed to know if I was ever really found. I'll be safe, I promise. Jonathan read it over and over. Then he looked up. She went back, he whispered. Back where? Renee asked. He exhaled. To the sidewalk. It took 2 days to retrace her journey. He remembered the block where he first saw her, 10 years ago, curled up in the cold near a rusted lamppost. The buildings had changed. A new coffee shop stood where the old hardware store used to be. The lamp was still there. He stood in the same spot, trying to picture her tiny frame, the soaked dress, her eyes like hollow wells. Noise pulled him from memory. Laughter, children. He turned and saw a small community center. Inside, a group of kids were sitting cross-legged on a rug while someone played piano. It was Imani. Hair tied back, no makeup, a hoodie and jeans, smiling. She looked up and saw him, their eyes locked. She didn't cry. Neither did he. Instead, she walked over and rested her forehead against his. I'm sorry, she whispered. You scared me. I had to remember. Later, sitting on a bench outside, she explained everything. I started hearing that voice again, she said. The one that says, I'm just a story people use to feel better, not a real person, just a symbol. Jonathan was silent. I needed to go back to the beginning, to the place before the music, before the lights, before people said my name, like I mattered. Did you find what you were looking for? He asked. She smiled faintly. I found kids who felt the way I used to. I taught them how to play one song. That was enough. That's all I needed. Jonathan nodded. Then let's build something here. Over the next few months, Imani quietly expanded Project Symphony's reach to overlooked neighborhoods, ones that didn't make headlines or attract donors. She called it Ground Zero Music. No posters, she told her team. No red carpets, just a piano, a safe room, and someone who listens. She personally taught in 5 different centers, sometimes without revealing who she was. She'd show up, roll up her sleeves, and ask the same question every time. What do you feel that no one hears? One day, a girl named Ania arrived. 11 years old, quiet as dust. She didn't speak for 2 weeks. Then one afternoon, she touched a single key on the piano and whispered, "This is my voice." Imani sat beside her and played a harmony. The girl flinched, then smiled. A few months later, Imani received a letter from a correctional facility in Ohio. It was from her biological father. Renee had mentioned he was imprisoned years earlier, but Imani had never responded to his outreach attempts. This time, the letter was different. No apologies, just a question. Do you ever play anything for me? She stared at the paper for a long time. Then she sat at the piano and composed Letter to the Hollow. It wasn't angry. It was haunting, slow, full of space between notes, as if she were answering a question with 1,000 silences. She mailed the recording to the prison with a note. You're not a villain in my music. You're an echo. That's all. She never heard back. She didn't need to. Imani turned 18 that winter. Instead of a party, she hosted a concert in a juvenile detention center. The stage was just a corner of a cafeteria. Her audience? 40 teenage boys in orange jumpsuits. She played Sidewalk to Sky, and afterward one of the boys asked, "Why would someone like you come here?" She answered, "Because someone once sat beside me when I didn't matter. Now I do the same." That night, after everyone left, Jonathan found her sitting on the edge of the stage. He handed her a small black box. Inside, a ring. Simple, silver. engraved with one word, seen. "I know I'm not your biological father," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "But I'm asking anyway, may I be your dad?" Imani didn't speak. She just leaned forward and hugged him so tight it hurt. The papers called it a silent adoption. But for Imani and Jonathan, it was the loudest moment of their lives. The sky over Manhattan was painted with gold and silver clouds, as if the city itself knew something extraordinary was about to happen. Imani Carter, now 18, a classically trained pianist, a national youth advocate, and the founder of Project Symphony, was preparing to perform her final American concert before leaving for the Royal Conservatory of London. The venue, the Lincoln Center, sold out, but she wasn't nervous. She stood backstage in a simple black gown, fingers stretched calmly, eyes closed. Her heart wasn't thinking of spotlights. It was thinking of sidewalks, of the girl she used to be, of the miracle she still didn't quite believe. 3 hours earlier, the dressing room had been a revolving door of well-wishers, journalists, old music tutors, kids from her foundation, even the mayor. But there was one knock that stopped her breath. When she opened the door, she froze. An elderly woman stood there, dressed in blue, a walking cane in one hand and a folded letter in the other. "I'm sorry to come like this," she said gently, "but I promised your mother I would, if I ever found you." Imani's knees almost gave out. The woman introduced herself as Claudine Marsh, her mother's childhood best friend, someone who had spent years searching after Imani vanished at the age of 6. "My name wasn't on any paperwork," Claudine said, "but I searched. God knows I searched." Imani stared at her, blinking back tears. "Was she?" she whispered, unable to finish. "She was love," Claudine said. "Even in her darkest hours, she loved you more than her own breath. She had journals filled with letters to you." She handed Imani the envelope. "Your mother's last words were, 'If anyone ever finds my baby, tell her she was never lost to me.'" Imani read the letter in silence. Inside were stories about lullabies she used to sing, the day Imani said her first word, moon, and how she'd begged every social worker in the city to help find her after her brother had taken her. "I couldn't save you," the letter read, "but I prayed the world would." By the time Imani stepped on the stage that night, her soul was a storm of grief, gratitude, and grace. The audience didn't know any of it. They just saw a young woman sit down at a grand piano, close her eyes, and begin to play a piece no one had ever heard before. It was called "The Letter That Found Me," and it was magic. Each note told a part of her journey: the cold sidewalk, the jacket that wrapped around her, the upright piano in Jonathan's living room, the silence that slowly turned into sound, the letter she held in her hand. By the time she reached the final note, many in the crowd were quietly crying, but there was no encore. She simply stood, bowed once, and walked off stage. Backstage, reporters waited. So did her team, but Imani didn't stop. She walked through the crowd, past the flashing lights, out into the New York night. Jonathan followed, a few steps behind, like he had for a decade. They stopped on a quiet street near Central. Park a different sidewalk now, but still a sidewalk. Imani sat down on the curb, her gown brushing the concrete. Jonathan joined her. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "I think I just said goodbye to a ghost." They sat in silence until Renee arrived, carrying 2 cups of tea from a street vendor. She handed one to Imani. "They're already calling your performance the soul of the city," Renee said, smiling. "I don't want to be a symbol anymore," Imani replied. "You're not. You're a symphony." Over the next year, Imani lived in London. She walked across ancient cobblestones with the same sense of awe she had felt the first time she touched a piano key. But fame had become noise. She rarely gave interviews now. She focused on composing, not for applause, but for healing. Then one day, something unexpected happened. Project Symphony received a handwritten letter from a young girl in Idaho. It read, "I used to live in a car with my mom. She died last winter, but someone played me your song on YouTube, the one called Sidewalk to Sky. I listened to it every night for a week. It made me want to stay. I think music is what people use to find their own voice, so now I play the violin. I'm not very good yet, but I'm alive. Thank you." The envelope had no return address, but Imani wept when she read it, and she recorded a new piece that night. It was called Stay. That year, Sidewalk Symphony, Imani's non-profit, exploded in scale. Celebrities donated, universities offered, fellowships, government grants flowed in, but she refused to make it into a brand. Each local chapter had one rule: never look down, always look beside. Their model was simple: a piano, a teacher, a room where no one was forgotten. They opened their 100th location in the very city where she had once slept on concrete. On her 20th birthday, Imani returned to that same lamppost, the one where she was found over a decade ago. This time, she brought a bench. It wasn't fancy, just sturdy, carved with a brass plaque. "To the ones who feel invisible, you are seen, you are sound, you are the beginning of a miracle." That night, she gave a private concert at a local shelter. A little boy with a bandaged arm asked her, "How did you know what song to play for us?" She smiled. "I didn't. I just listened long enough." Years passed. Imani became known as a composer who changed how the world viewed music therapy and childhood trauma. She testified before the UN. She built music schools in war zones. She was nominated for a Pulitzer, but none of it changed her. She still taught kids to play broken scales. She still answered handwritten letters. And every year, she returned to that bench beneath the lamppost, sat for a moment in silence, and left behind a single flower. One year, she brought her daughter, a small, curly-haired child with eyes that looked exactly like hers had all those years ago. "Mommy," the girl asked, "what are we waiting for?" Imani smiled. "We're waiting for someone to believe they matter." "Can I play them something?" Imani nodded. The girl took out a tiny toy keyboard and began to play a shaky version of Amazing Grace. A tear slipped down Imani's cheek, and across the street, unnoticed by most, a teenager paused his steps, turned toward the music and smiled. The miracle wasn't that Imani was found. The miracle was that she became the one who found others. Again and again. If you've been moved by Imani's story, remember this: you never know who you're passing on the sidewalk. Be the person who stops.